Alison Woodall, and I have an online guide called Make the Move that takes you step by step through the process of planning your move to a new state in the USA. And you can find out more at alisonwoodall.com. Well, today I have the pleasure of talking to Andrew Lowe, and he is a realtor in Senoia, Newnan and Peachtree City in Georgia. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you so much, Alison. Great to be here.
Well, I am really looking forward to talking to you about Georgia because that is my current home. Yeah. But before we get talking about your beautiful area, we have to address your accent because you are not born and raised in America, like I wasn't either.
That's right. Yeah, I was born in Belfast in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and grew up in a little town outside Belfast and went to school there, college, did all that, and moved full-time to the United States in 2008. Sworn as a citizen in 2019, which was a big deal.
All right. And so where did you move to, first of all?
When I first came over, I actually was sponsored by a rugby club to come play for a team in Las Vegas. And so I was, 24, 25 years old, playing rugby in the Southern California League, which, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, for away games and home games in Las Vegas. So it was certainly a fun and interesting time.
Wow. And so for all the people who are watching in California, you then moved to the Bay Area. So you understand how amazing it is to live in California, but you also understand the downsides too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did 9-10 years in the East Bay, Concord, San Ramon, Danville. And yeah, while I had a great time there, there's also everything's a double-edged sword. And at some point, I think the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and we had to make a decision on what to do as a family.
Okay, and you had quite an extensive list of all the things that you wanted, which is what took you to Georgia?
Absolutely, yeah. So we wanted to be intentional about where we moved to and all the factors that go into making that decision we laid out on paper. And one of the kind of, I would say, niche things that was important to us was a small town within an hour of a major airport, and the town had to have no more than one lane in each direction in the main street, because there's an awful lot of attractive, cute places, and they have 2 lanes in each direction, 3 lanes in each direction, and it just ruins the kind of atmosphere, walkability, and quaintness of the town. And that's what we really wanted, a quaint, small town America place.
Okay. Well, and that's always my thing. Whenever I move, I'm very clear that I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere in England. And while that was fun as a child, that is not where I want to live as an adult. But I like to have that small town feel, but I know that I cannot be more than an hour and a half away from a big metropolitan area, because then you get the best of both worlds. You can go into Atlanta if you want to see the opera, go to the theater, go to a big sporting event. But day to day, your life is that small town community feel where you know your neighbors.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we were looking for.
So. Okay, so let's talk about, so are you actually in Senoia?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where they filmed The Walking Dead.
Right. So Georgia actually films more movies and TV shows than California. That's a little known fact. And so Senoia, for the last kind of 10 years, has been the filming location for The Walking Dead. It's a crazy hit TV show. Zombies, not my thing, but whatever. The set of Alexandria, which was a metal walled compound, is actually at the bottom of Main Street in Senoia. And so for the last 10 years, people have been coming here to check out this beautiful town, the set of The Walking Dead. They do tours. One of the actors, Norman Reedus, owns a restaurant in town. He's also got, I think, a sister restaurant in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That it's a hoot.
Thinking about the actual area around, you're an hour from Atlanta, maybe, in good traffic.
Yes, an hour to. So my wife's cousin lives in Buckhead. We're an hour from them.
Okay, but the actual area that you live in, describe it. Is it tree covered? Is it hills? What does it look like?
I often, when I first started looking around in Georgia, I couldn't believe how much forest. It just looks like back in the day. You imagine whoever pioneered this area, it was just trees everywhere. And so if there's any land that's not developed, it's just packed with pine trees and water oaks and whatever other stuff grows here. So very lush. Georgia is a pretty lush and fertile place. You know, a lot of stuff grows here.
It is. And so I always think it's funny because people, when they move from California, all they want is trees on their property. And I always say, with trees come leaves. And I lived in Georgia for 15 years before we moved to Florida and then California. And now I've been back for a year. And I can't think of how many weeks I have spent cumulatively blowing leaves. It's got to be 2 or 3 hours every week blowing leaves. But you can burn them, or at least where I live,
right,
you
exactly.
in a burn barrel and you burn them, which you can't do in California.
Right, it's that when you first get here and you're like, something's burning. It must be, and no, it's just like a guy over there burning a bunch of limbs and whatnot. So that's actually quite cute. And of course, in California, we had a bunch of redwoods in our yard, and they drop as much stuff as anything. So, you know, you get oak leaves here, or the worst actually is the pecan trees that drop the pods of like pollen. Man, those things are a mess.
Yes, but they look beautiful. So I always just say, if you're wanting the trees, you have to understand that it goes back to your comment about the double-edged sword. With every good thing, there's some, you know, but it's just, you know, it's just fall when you're blowing leaves, and in spring there's a little bit of pollen, but it's all very manageable. Well,
and pollen, you mentioned pollen. I mean, California, you would get we were in the East Bay, you know, Northern California. Your car would be dusted with pollen for, you know, a month in spring. So yeah, that happens in Georgia also, but where we were in California, that's just the way it was also.
Yes, and I was in the Central Valley, so I was even closer to the pollen from all the almond trees and the cherry trees. So
yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? There's always a downside to wherever you live, but to me, there's way more upsides than downsides in Georgia. It feels like home to me. So let's talk about your market.
Sure.
For someone who is, you know, new to your market, what would you say would be kind of like your average price point, just so people know if they can afford to be in your market?
Yeah, I actually pulled up some data on that, but I looked at the 4 of the main areas here: Senoia and Newnan, which are in Coweta County; Peachtree City, which is in Fayette County; and then Hogansville, which is in Meriwether and Troup County. The average price point in Senoia is $487,000. The interesting thing about this place is there's a high-end market where $1.5 million properties are sold. New construction on an acre or half acre in that price point, and the lowest priced home that needs some work is probably about 100,000. So the whole range is possible in the Senoia market, and that pretty much holds true for Newnan and Sharpsburg and Hogansville. The one that's probably more expensive in this market generally is Peachtree City. That has an average price point of 560,000.
Mm-hmm. And you know, the average price point is always skewed by those really beautiful multi-million-dollar homes that you can find in any market. But to me, Georgia as a whole is a very accessible state to live in if you're prepared to be a little bit further out of the town, maybe buy an older property that needs some work. You can find those homes for 200,000 or 300,000 that are in, you know, that you would want to live in. And a lot of people, particularly people leaving California, are like, well, I can afford $400,000 home. Well, that in Georgia will get you something really
get
good.
You a beautiful house. I mean, there's new construction here in the 400s, right? I've sold 2 or 3 houses under 300 that people are delighted with, and you might get a half acre, an acre, and you're only 5 minutes from town. So it's absolutely, Alison, the price point here is so much, the barrier for entry is so much lower than we've all experienced in California.
And so we have to talk about property tax. Are your property taxes, would you know what your property taxes are on average?
Yes. So it's calculated very differently from California. In Northern California, the system is basically 1.2% and up of your purchase price, and then that just gets applied from the moment you purchase the property. The way it works in Georgia, they have what's called millage rate, and it's kind of complex to try and explain to folks that have no experience, but they or that aren't here. A good rule of thumb is it's about 70% of what you would expect to pay for your property tax in California. That's probably a fair enough estimation or guesstimation for someone that's going to be coming from California.
Okay, and for me, it always seemed very reasonable. The only time property taxes didn't seem reasonable for me was when I didn't have kids, and there's all these different things for like schools and school buses,
Yes.
and all these random things. And I was like, I don't have kids. Why should I be paying for that? But then as soon as you do have kids, then you're like, okay, that makes sense because the school bus system's excellent. The school system's excellent. Now I don't mind paying for it. But back then I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's just an unusual way that they calculate it. I don't quite understand the logic, because they do an appraised value from the county, and then they take the appraised value and come up with like an assessed value, which is maybe 40% of the appraised value. And then they apply the millage rate for all of those line items that you were talking about, school buses, roads, lighting, whatever. And they multiply it into that assessed value, and that gives you then your end property tax. So there's a lot goes into it. I don't know why they make it that complex, but it's the way it is.
The way I look at it, I'm like, how much do I owe them? There's no way to get out of it. Life in Georgia is excellent. I will just pay it.
So I do have a little bit of info. I'm actually in the process of appealing our property tax with the county board of assessors. And in Georgia, there is the homestead exemption, which allows you to lower your property tax just a little. There's also a rule here that if you appeal your property tax and see the appeal process through to the county board of equalization, and I have a meeting to attend in November to do that, it freezes your property tax for 3 years. So even though you may be wrong, they disagree with you, whatever, the fact that you go and see it through, the rules are here, it freezes it for 3 years. So I'm halfway through that process right now. I've educated my community about it here, and had a few people thank me and want to do a little community event to educate some of the seniors and whatnot.
And so we kind of touched on schools, but what if people are moving to your area and they have kids? What are the schools like in Georgia?
Fayette County, which is where Peachtree City is located, they would have what are considered the best schools in the area, the best government schools or public schools, whatever you want to call them. Newnan, Senoia, they're all Coweta County schools, also well regarded, just a little bit more of an emerging demographic here, because historically it's been so much more rural in Coweta County, which is Senoia and Newnan.
What I always say with school rating, like if you go on greatschools.org and a school maybe has a 5 or 6 out of 10, that shouldn't put you off moving to the area, because it's based on test scores, and there's so much more that goes into a school community than whatever that rating is.
Absolutely. And so I come from a family of educators in Ireland. My mom's just elementary school teacher. When looking at other states and their education, I think you'll probably be pretty happy when you're comparing it to the schools that you've come from in California.
Yeah, well, my kids are in Gwinnett County, and they went from Florida, where the school was excellent, to California, didn't learn anything new for a year and a half, and then moved back to Georgia. And we had to get tutors for my son because he was so far behind, because he literally hadn't learned anything new in a year and a half in California, because California was so far behind where Georgia is. And he's still sort of playing catch up for that year.
I believe that. And there's also a lot of private schools here. You know, people save a lot of money on whatever their mortgage expenses in California. It may be right that you're interested in a private school. There's Trinity Christian School is a big private K through 12th grade here in Peachtree City. And there's a bunch of charter schools also. So there's a lot of options here, regardless of what stage of education your kid's at.
Well, so let's talk about your employment in your area. Obviously, you've got local employment, but you're also very close to the Atlanta metro area as well. That's
right. Yeah. So, of course, being this close to Atlanta Airport, we're about 40 minutes away. We get a lot of pilots. Delta is a major employer here. There's a Panasonic headquarters here. There's Rinnai that build the tankless water heaters. They have a headquarters right here. One of the reasons we like the south side of Atlanta, and again, we're about an hour south of the city, is it's much more easily accessible than, in our opinion, than the north side, which has a lot more built up in Alpharetta and Murrieta. So this is definitely a developing part of rural Georgia that still has proximity to the city, and people can zoom in there and get their work done and come home.
Yeah, and then presumably you have an Amazon warehouse, and you'll have Walmart, and you'll have all of those amenities that everybody has that also provide employment.
Absolutely. So Savannah Port is one of the biggest ports on the eastern seaboard, and what I've been told is that in our county and surrounding counties, there's strategically some of these massive 1 million square foot warehouses that companies like Amazon and Walmart and all of them have, because it's like a day for a trucker from the port. So, and it's also the 85 freeway is a main artery to truck stuff all over the country.
So let's talk about like recreation in your area. Are you near any lakes? Are there hills? What kind of is there to do in your area?
Absolutely. Well, rural Georgia has plenty of trees, plenty of outdoor stuff. The counties all have various park and recreation areas. So Chattahoochee Hills, which is on the west side of Coweta County. Yeah, there's parks there with people mountain biking, gravel racing, hiking.
Yeah. And you're not that far from the coast. I actually drove down through your area to go down to the coast of Florida. So it's, 4 hours maybe?
Yeah, so 3.5 to 4 hours will get you on the Gulf Coast and the Panhandle, Destin, Panama City, Pensacola, all that. So the way I have kind of parallel everything from California is people drive from the East Bay 3 hours to Tahoe, and we are maybe just about 3.5 hours to get to whatever you want. The mountains in North Carolina, the best lakes in the southeast, or the Gulf Coast beaches in the Panhandle in Florida.
Mm-hmm. And also there's the beaches near Savannah as well. So there's all, Tybee Island and all around there.
Island and all that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, normally, when I talk to realtors, I'm like, okay, when I want to move to this person's area, but it's easy talking to you because I'm already here. I'm just, an hour or so north of you. So you don't have to sell Georgia to me. I think it's amazing. I think we talked about most of the things. I know humidity is a thing for people moving, particularly from Northern California, where it's not humid at all. My experience of Georgia, summer can be a bit hot. It can be a bit humid. But then the winters are, there's very rarely snow. If there is snow in Georgia, everything stops and you accept that, and you just sit at home and you enjoy the fact that nobody goes anywhere. But I love the weather here.
Sure, me too. I mean, look, I grew up in Ireland, and I don't want super hot weather. I'm used to the cold and the wet. That's kind of, Ireland in a nutshell. The weather here has actually been very mild, I would say. I mean, the summer, sure, it seems like it hits July 1st and the temperature goes up a little bit and the humidity, gets to some of those days that are a little uncomfortable. But paralleling it to California, where for the last 5 years that we lived there, we had maybe a month where you couldn't go outside because of the fires. There's 105, 110-degree days in the East Bay where we lived. So it's not unreasonable an exchange.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered about your area that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we have really enjoyed is the quality of the people that we've met. I mean, we came in knowing no one. My wife's cousin is in Atlanta, but we're, an hour from there, come to this town, and we've just integrated into the most fantastic community. There's a lot of events that go on in town, and it's volunteer organized, volunteer led. So we have, like, tonight is Alive After 5 Friday. They shut down downtown. Open containers are allowed in that little downtown district. Families, there'll be 2, maybe 3,000 people will show up this evening with arts and crafts, live music. That happens every month. Then concert summer series through the summer for live music. We have, this year they had Porch Fest. That was 16 historic homes that had musicians on the front porch, and people could, walk around town with their drinks and listen to live music, socialize. There's a kids fishing derby at the lake, right? So, little kids getting out there and catching little mini whatevers out of the small lake that's in town. There's, what other events have we? Movie night for the kids. There's Christmas events. It seems like every month there's stuff going on. It's led by the community, and it's just so much fun here.
And it's so easy to meet people when you have those events, and there's that, because people always need help. So if you feel like just going out to the event and saying hi is not enough, you can actually get involved in these community outreach, and that's how you meet so many people. And people in the South just really are friendlier, in my opinion.
Well, I think in California, if I was thinking about some of the lessons we can take from what we learn in California, is, you got to get involved in your community. You get out of it what you put in. And when we moved here, we noticed that the people are really pouring into their community to organize these things, to make it better. And when that's going on around you, you get the opportunity to take part and meet people, quality people. It's been great. The way I've been telling the people that I work with about this is, these communities have always had a local economy, and their real estate has always been based on the financial economic situation for the county or the local town. That is gone. We are in the migration that's going on in America. People could be earning their money out of New York, LA, you name the financial center, and they don't want to be in the city where the crime is and the worries. They want their family in a rural community. So all of a sudden, these little rural communities are blooming because people are coming in that have solid income that's from an outside economic hub. And it's really, I think it's super exciting. It's changing the country. It's changing these little towns. And yeah, I think it's very exciting.
Well, wonderful. Well, so you have a great experience having moved from California, understanding what it's like living in California, and having made the move to Georgia. So if someone is wanting to make that move from California or any state, wherever you're watching this, we talk mostly about California because of the Facebook groups, but people can move from anywhere to Georgia. How would they contact you? What's the best way?
The best way would just be to give me a call or shoot me a text. My number is 678-877-7570. And if you want to reach me on my California number, it's 925-999-0125. And yeah, I'll pick up or text back, and we'll get you relocated here. We've got people, in this area, Illinois, New York, California, all of these big city areas, Cook County, Illinois, there's people from there moving to Atlanta. The same thing with New York, upstate New York. It's now's the time.
It absolutely is. Well, thank you so much for everything that you shared with us. I know you'll have helped an awful lot of people, and it was great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You too. Appreciate your time, Alison.
So long, California. I'm headed off to somewhere new. I may lose the mountains, the rhythm of the waves, but I won't lose the memory of you, 'cause you're on my mind every time I see a wildflower or
everything. There's a balance there.
Yes. And what I always think is that the cost of water in Georgia is so cheap compared to California. The first time we got our water bill in the Central Valley, every month we paid more for water than we paid the 1 month of the year when we filled a 24-foot round above ground pool in Georgia.
Yeah.
My water bill in Georgia, it's always $25 a month. My California water bill would be like 200 and something. It was insane.
Yeah, so we filled our pool. I think it cost $90 to fill our pool, and yeah, that's been amazing. And the heat, heating and cooling. We have a much bigger house than what we had, in California, 2,000 square feet, built in the 60s, no insulation. I could have a $800-900 a month power bill for cooling it in the summer. Here, twice the size of the house, foam insulation, and my most expensive power bill to date with 3 zones running 24/7 is like $300. Mm-hmm. So it's,
my
husband, third of the price.
My husband, who's Georgia born and raised, would tell you it's nuclear power versus windmills.
Right.
That's what makes power in Georgia cheap. There's not very much renewable power, so it makes your bills much more affordable.
Yeah, well, that whole nuclear energy is interesting. I think we're probably going to have that as a society, a culture, a country. That debate is coming about whether or not we're going to engage some of that nuclear energy, because it's a lot different from the Chernobyl type horror that everyone has been programmed to think.
It is, yeah. I'll take my cheap bill. I don't even know where I know there's a nuclear plant somewhere in Georgia. I just don't know where.
I don't even know where it is.
And my husband could tell me, but
it's
anyway.
not here.
So what else?